Eleanor adjusted the blanket over Harold's knees and sat back in her armchair, the one with the worn floral pattern they had chosen together in 1965. Outside, autumn leaves drifted past the window in slow spirals, carried by a gentle wind. Inside, the house was quiet except for the soft ticking of the old mantel clock and Harold's occasional murmurs, words that no longer formed sentences, names that no longer belonged to anyone he knew. 5 years had passed since the diagnosis. Alzheimer's, the doctor called it, as though a single word could contain the slow, relentless theft of a life. Harold, once a tall, laughing man who could fix anything with his hands and tell stories that kept the children spellbound, now spent his days gazing at nothing. Some mornings he called her, Mama. Other mornings he looked at her with polite confusion, as if she were a kind stranger who had wandered into his home. Eleanor was 85 now. Her hips ached when she stood too long, her fingers trembled when she buttoned his shirts, but she refused help from the children. "He's my husband," she told them firmly. "I'll care for him until the end." And so she did, bathing him, feeding him soft foods, reading aloud from the photo albums even when he no longer seemed to understand. She missed the man he had been. She missed their conversations over coffee, the way he would hum old big band tunes while fixing the fence, the way he would pull her close on quiet evenings and say, "Let's dance, Ellie girl." They had met at a dance hall in Chicago in 1958. She was 18, in a pink dress her mother had sewn by hand. He was 20, home on leave from the army, handsome in his uniform. When Glenn Miller's Moonlight Serenade began to play, he crossed the room and asked her to dance. She said yes, and that was that. 60 years of marriage, 3 children, 5 grandchildren, countless ordinary days made extraordinary by love. One October evening, the light in the living room turned golden and soft. Eleanor felt an ache deeper than usual, an exhaustion that settled in her bones. She stood slowly and walked to the old record player in the corner, the one Harold had surprised her with on their silver anniversary. Dust covered the lid, but the mechanism still worked. She lifted the arm, selected the worn 78 revolutions per minute record, and set the needle down. The opening notes of Moonlight Serenade filled the room, brass and strings, smooth and timeless. Harold turned his head from the window. For a long moment he simply listened. Then something shifted. The fog in his blue eyes lifted, like clouds parting after a long storm. He looked at Eleanor, truly looked, and recognition dawned. "Ellie," he said, his voice steady and warm, the voice she hadn't heard clearly in years. "My beautiful Ellie." Tears sprang to her eyes instantly. "Harold." He smiled, the crooked, boyish smile that had stolen her heart all those decades ago. He pushed himself up from the chair with surprising strength, steady on his feet, and extended his hand. "May I have this dance, darling?" Her heart pounded. She took his hand, felt the familiar roughness of his palm, and let him draw her close. They began to sway in the small space between the sofa and the coffee table, moving as they always had, one hand at her waist, the other clasping hers, their steps slow and perfectly matched. Less than grok. Render card underscore it equals, B3 CCE 2 inches card underscore type equals, image underscore card, type equals, render underscore searched underscore image, greater than 1 inch large, less than grok, render greater than. He rested his cheek against her silver hair and hummed along with the music. "Do you remember the first time we danced to this?" he whispered. "Every single day," she answered, voice breaking. "I was terrified you'd say no. Thought a girl like you wouldn't waste a dance on a clumsy soldier." "You were never clumsy, Harry. You were perfect." They danced through the entire song, and when it ended, Eleanor let the record play on to the next track. Harold didn't falter. He spoke softly of their wedding day, how nervous he'd been walking her down the aisle, of the night their first daughter was born, how he'd cried harder than Eleanor, of the road trip in their old Ford, singing off-key to the radio all the way to California. "I loved every minute of our life," he said. "The good, the hard, all of it. Because it was with you." Eleanor pressed closer, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I've loved you since that first dance. I love you still." He pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. "You've been my anchor, Ellie. My everything. Thank you for the most beautiful life a man could ask for." They danced until the sky outside turned indigo and the record reached its end. Then he led her to the sofa, still holding her hand, and they sat together talking until late. Simple things, precious things, words they hadn't shared in years. less than grok. Render card underscore it equals 732 AW 8 inches card underscore type equals image underscore card type equals render underscore searched underscore image greater than 5 inches large less than grok. Render greater than. The next morning, the fog had returned. Harold ate his oatmeal without comment, stared out the window again, and did not recognize the song when Eleanor played it once more. But she knew what had happened. In some deep, protected corner of his heart, he had found her one last time. He had given her the goodbye they both deserved. 2 weeks later, Harold passed peacefully in his sleep, a faint smile on his lips. Eleanor still lives in the little house. Every evening at dusk, she puts on Moonlight Serenade, closes her eyes, and feels his arms around her once more. And in the quiet rhythm of the music, they dance, their last dance that somehow never ends.